Hey, Palabo here. Welcome to Flashback Friday. In this episode of the Radio Vagabond, you can join me when I explore top 10 things to see in a perfect week in Cape Town, South Africa. And I get a surprise visit all the way from Denmark. This episode was first released in April 2020. I'm back at the airport now with a cup of coffee and a book I just bought called Road Tripping South Africa. So I'm just getting some inspiration for my upcoming road trip through South Africa. But right now I'm here waiting for two beautiful young women that have been flying all the way from Denmark. It's of course my two daughters, and I am so looking forward to spending a week with them here in the Cape Town area. So this is going to be so amazing. I haven't seen them for 4 months, and to show them my favorite city in the world is something I've really been looking forward to.
Meet Palabo, a digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world. This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
As a full-time traveler, it's always great to have visitors, especially from your kids. If you're a regular listener and have been listening for a while, you might remember that my youngest daughter traveled with me for 4 months in the beginning of my journey in Asia. I met her in Bangkok, and then we were in Chiang Mai, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Hong Kong, China, North Korea, back to China, then South Korea. And when we got to Japan, my oldest daughter joined us, and we had 2 great weeks together during cherry blossom season. Since then, I've only seen them when I've been back in Denmark. When I knew that I was going to be in Cape Town, my favorite city in the world, they decided to be spontaneous and book a flight to visit me, and I could not be happier. So I planned to be the perfect tour guide and show them why I love this place. But first, I planned something that is a must-see when you're in Cape Town. A place with a unique and dark history. A place that requires a short trip on a ferry. My name is Palabo, and this is the Radio Vagabond podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by this website called hotels25.com. If you're a regular listener, you have heard me mention this before, and I can't say this enough. This is a cool website. It helps you find the cheapest hotel rooms around the world. Hotels25.com. You should try it out. It actually works. It's Sunday morning and we're on our way to do one of the things that you really need to do, the trip to Robben Island. Like San Francisco has Alcatraz, Cape Town has Robben Island, an island close to the city where there used to be a prison. When you visit Robben Island, you start with a 40-minute boat ride from V&A waterfront. But let's have some facts about the place we're going to visit. And now, facts about where we are. Facts about where we are. The World Heritage Site, Robben Island, takes its name from the Dutch word for seals, robben. The Dutch Afrikaans name, Robben Island, translates to Seal Island. It's 7 kilometers, a little more than 4 miles, off the coast of Cape Town, and the island itself is 3 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. The island was used as a prison in the mid-1600s. This was where the Dutch settlers sent people who refused to bend to colonial rule. In 30 years, from 1961, a maximum security prison here held enemies of apartheid. And that was facts about where we are. And one of the prisoners behind bars for 18 years on Robben Island was a political activist named Nelson Mandela. The South Africans call him Madiba. And our guide, who's also an ex-prisoner, called him Father Mandela.
Father Mandela spent at this prison 18 years. After he served the 18 years, he was transferred to Pollsmoor prison. And in 1990, Mandela was released as a free man. In all, he spent 27 years behind the bars.
Father Mandela was here for 18 years, and in total he served 27 years behind bars until he was released in 1990. After the fall of apartheid, he was awarded Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 with the former president Frederick William de Klerk, and 1 year later, this former prisoner of Robben Island was elected President of South Africa. The guide takes us for a walk in the prison and tells stories of what it was like being here. And then we get into the corridor with the cells in B block. One of them being the cell of prisoner 46664. A 2x2 meter cell with a thin mattress on the concrete floor as a bed and a bucket for a toilet. In 1994, Mandela was back on Robben Island as a free man.
One of the things that is difficult for me to comprehend is that we spent such a long time here.
This is a clip from BBC showing him back inside the tiny cell, looking out through the barred window.
There were moments of joy. But of course, there were painful moments because the apartheid regime was an expert in persecuting people psychologically.
They were allowed one visit a year for half an hour and one censored letter every 6 months of no more than 500 words. Outside is a courtyard where Mandela and his fellow prisoners could eat breakfast, exercise, and work long days in the yard hammering rocks. Editing this episode, we're in the middle of the corona pandemic, and I'm alone in an apartment here in Cape Town during lockdown. We're not allowed to go for a walk unless it's going to the supermarket or the pharmacy. We're all to stay at home. And it's boring. Even though I'm okay here, I miss going out meeting people. And then I think of the 18 years Mandela spent in this tiny cell in Robben Island. And really, we shouldn't complain. We have Netflix, YouTube, Wi-Fi, and TikTok. We have music, radio, and podcasts. We can talk to our friends via all kinds of video calls, and we do that all the time. Mandela was just alone here with his thoughts. And still, he later said that he came out of prison a better man. That being alone with your thoughts gave him a wonderful opportunity. Here he is again from his revisit to the cell back in 1994.
Well, the fact that you could sit alone and think gave us a wonderful opportunity to change ourselves, your behavior.
What a remarkable man. This was not that long after he was released from 27 years in prison, most of this in this small cell with a thin mattress as a bed and a bucket as a toilet, and a light bulb shining on his head 24 hours a day. Let that sink in. And then maybe give this a thought. Can we use this difficult time for us all with social distancing as a
wonderful opportunity to sit alone and think?
Then we get on a bus ride around the island and pass a bleak limestone quarry. It was here Mandela and his inmates worked virtually every day for 13 years, digging up rocks, some of which paved the road we were driving on. The sun was so relentless, and the white limestone quarry so bright and dusty that Mandela got snow blindness, something that damaged his eyes. Our guide tells us how Mandela and the other heroes of the South African anti-apartheid movement used their time in the quarry to teach each other literature, philosophy, political theory, and much more. In 1997, 3 years after apartheid fell, the prison was turned into Robben Island Museum. Like I said, Robben Island is a must-see for any visitor to South Africa. Tours leave Cape Town 4 times a day, and even though I've been there before, I'm glad I went back and shared this experience with my daughters. When we come back, we're going to the township Langa and for a walk in Bo-Kaap. Stay with us. I'm not sure exactly what happened. In the podcasting community, people talk about their download numbers dropping here in the corona pandemic because people don't commute now, where more or less the whole world is working from home. Well, I just discovered that it's not the case for the Radio Vagabond. It's always been my ambition to take you on a journey from the comfort of your own home, and I'm glad to see that more and more listeners agree. March 2020 was by far the month where more people than ever before listened to this podcast. In fact, the download numbers doubled from the month before, and compared to January, it was more than tripled. This is all thanks to you for spreading the word. So, thank you. You're the best. If you still enjoy listening, please keep on doing that. Tell a friend, share the link, and maybe even write a review in your podcast app. In fact, one of the latest reviews talk about why she's listening. It's from Zoe from the US, and she writes, COVID-19 is with us, and I am so enjoying traveling with you, Palle, via your podcast. Always expands my view of the world. Thank you, Zoe. And thank you, Zoe. And now, back to the show.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
We're at the foot of Signal Hill, at the edge of the city center, and we're about to go on a tour in what used to be known as the Malay Quarter. We're going to one of Cape Town's most distinct neighborhoods, Bo-Kaap, or as our guide calls it, Bo-Kaap. The neighborhood dates back to the 1760s, when a number of rental houses were built and leased to slaves. These people were known as Cape Malays. They were brought here from Malaysia, Indonesia, and the rest of Africa to work in the Cape. It was one of the first South African settlements of freed slaves and Muslim immigrants. Now, all the houses are really colorful. But that was not always the case. It's said that it was partly because of the fact that while the slaves lived here on lease, the houses had to be white. When this rule was finally lifted and the slaves were allowed to buy the properties, they began painting the houses in bright colors as an expression of their freedom. Our guide said that it was a doctor who started this trend to make it easier for people to find his house.
He had his practice in a Bo-Kaap headquarters, and in case of emergency, as you see, most of these houses look pretty identical, right? They really struggled to find his place. So this doctor thought, well, let me paint my house red with white stripes so that they could find my spot. And then the tailor thought, well, this is a brilliant idea. And so did the cook. So they initially just started painting the houses to suit the colors of trade. So we know today the tailors, they use colors orange and pink. The cooks, they still use the color purple.
Bo-Kaap is as vibrant as it is culturally rich. The historic quarter is a dynamic melting pot with cultural attractions, traditional restaurants, craft markets, museums, a mosque and churches. A visit to Burkab provides a look back in time as well as a window into the neighborhood's modern culture. You can sample the local cuisine on a food tour, visit Dompas Museum in the quarter's oldest building, or do like we did, get a personal insight from a local on a guided walking tour. We used Free Walking Tours Cape Town. I put a link in the show notes. Oh, and then it's great for Instagram, especially if you, like me, bring 2 beautiful models. See what I mean on theRadioVagabond.com. Before we continue, in a township in Cape Town, I want to tell you about another podcast I produce. It's called Travel Matters, and it's the official podcast from T-Bex, the community of travel content creators, and I co-host with T-Bex CEO Rick Calvert.
Welcome to Travel Matters, the official podcast of T-Bex.
In the recent episode, we talk about COVID-19's impact on the travel industry and on our daily lives. We check in with co-conference director for T-Bex North America, Tomiko Harvey in Tennessee, and Shane Dallas, the conference director for T-Bex Europe in Nairobi, Kenya, to hear about life where they are. Also, they share some tips and suggestions that content creators can work on while the world is standing still. But a big part of the latest episode is a very interesting conversation with Angelo. He's an American and the founder and CEO of Live Italy Tours. And right now, he's at home in Rome, Italy. His story gives you a glimpse into what a tour operator business looks like and how COVID-19 is changing everything. Angelo tells us that he misses taking a group of guests to a crowded place.
I surely wish I could be inside the Vatican Museum surrounded by 30,000 sweating people right now. I really miss that, even though it was horrendous at some point. And maybe actually, if there's any positivity in this, if we get out of this as soon as possible and people are still willing to travel in 2020, this is probably the best year to do it. I don't think that these museums and these venues and these streets that have been overcrowded with mass tourism for the past 5 to 6 years are going to even see remotely the amount of numbers they used to see up until last year. And so if you have the ability to travel, this is the time, because you enjoy an empty museum, you enjoy an empty Coliseum, you enjoy beautiful restaurants that are ready to serve you and you only in a very, very particular way. So, I mean, this is probably the year.
If you're interested in the travel industry, travel blogging, and everything around that, I think you will find this podcast interesting. Just search for Travel Matters wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
Next on my tour guiding days with my visiting daughters was a trip to the township Langa. Langa is the oldest township in South Africa and also the closest to Cape Town. Now it's a safe and friendly tourist destination and a highly unique experience, totally different from any other experiences in Cape Town. We're about to be introduced to a vibrant township community and the bustling Langa Arts Quarter. When we arrive in Langa, we set out on foot to explore the wonderful community. Being on foot is a more real and immersive experience than driving from one location to another.
From
Denmark.
Denmark.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Hey, we've got a little friend here. Hey.
It gives you an opportunity to interact with the people as they go about their daily lives.
Looks like him.
After a visit to a craft workshop, we came to Langa Heritage Museum to learn more about Cape Town's oldest township. It's also called the Dompas Museum.
So guys, we are here. This is the museum, the Dompas Museum.
Dompas quite literally means dumb pass or stupid pass. During apartheid, all black people were required to carry passbooks when they were outside the township.
The Dompas is a book that was issued to African men to control the movement of the black African men back in the 1940s and the 1950s.
If they didn't carry their Dompas, they would get a fine, get arrested, or even deported. I asked one of the locals, Loyola, to tell me more about this museum.
This is the Dompas Museum. It has been built here to conserve the history of Langa and the history of the migrant workers from the Eastern Cape.
So this museum tells the story of the whole thing about the uprising, and people don't want to be carrying them and all that.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is about.
The atmosphere in the museum is a mixture of abuse, sadness, defiance, and triumph. The 21st of March 1960, 50,000 people burned their Dompas to protest the apartheid laws. If you've seen the film Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom, you might remember a scene where 5,000 to 10,000 black South Africans gathered unarmed at a police station in Sharpeville near Johannesburg without their passbook. They wanted to state their case by getting arrested.
Protest against new laws requiring every African to carry a pass at all times.
But instead, the police opened fire, shooting protesters in their back as they were running away. In 2 minutes, the police fired more than 1,300 bullets. They killed 69 people, including 8 women and 10 children, and wounded 180 in a hail of submachine gun fire. Since 1994, the 21st of March has been commemorated as Human Rights Day in South Africa, and Sharpeville was the site selected by President Nelson Mandela for the signing of the Constitution of South Africa on the 10th of September 1996. After the visit to the Dompas Museum, we went for a walk in Langa to visit a home and experience a variety of lifestyle. On the way there, we met a group of young boys in school uniforms. The children of Langa are very open to visitors, as children are in most places in the world. The boys we met took an interest in my youngest daughter, Clara, and her camera. She took a lot of pictures with them, making funny faces. You can see a few of them on the RadioVagabond.com. I highly recommend that you go on a township tour when you're in Cape Town. It's a different experience to visiting the spectacular beauty of Cape Town. Here, the beauty is not the mountains, the scenery, and the plants. Here, the beauty is the people. You'll meet up with people who have struggled to overcome. As you know, South Africa has been extremely segregated for decades during apartheid, and still today they have some of the greatest separations between the rich and the poor anywhere in the world. But understanding the struggle of the past, seeing how people make the most of a difficult situation, and talking with the people face to face, you will leave with a whole new feel of South Africa. And that's why we went. And I'm also glad I could share this experience with my daughters. As mentioned in the beginning of the episode, this was a week of me being a tour guide for my daughters. We saw more than Robben Island, Bo Kaap and Langa. I also took them down to Cape Point and along Devil's Peak Drive. We visited wineries and we drove around some stunning nature all the way down to Falls Bay and Simonstown, where we met the famous African penguins on Boulders Beach. We even had time to go to the Artscape Theatre to see the West Side Story, the musical that just happened to be on tour at the time they visited me. And then we spent a bit of time just hanging out at the V&A waterfront. there's a big mall where we also managed to catch a movie or two. On the last night, we were sitting on the slopes of Signal Hill, watching the sun go down in the ocean. A great way to end a wonderful week. One of the things that we didn't get to do was to go on top of Table Mountain, but they close it when it's clouded, when it has the tablecloth on the table. And it just happened to be that all the days that we didn't have any other plans, so we didn't get to go. We also didn't make time to climb Lion's Head. But apart from that, it was, if you're counting, my personal top 10 things to do if you have a week in Cape Town. I put the complete list on theRadioVagabond.com. Produced by radioguru.co.uk and partly supported by Hotels25.com. My name is Palle Bo. Thanks for listening, and thanks again for sharing. See ya!